Good evening, and very warm welcome to the MFL Applicant Event tonight. I'm being joined by Benedict.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us online.
So first of all, huge apologies that we've had a very last minute change about this event. We thought with the disruptions this morning for the trains and with the snow coming down quite heavily still at lunchtime, that it would be better for us to do this online for safety of our student helpers so that they could get home, but also for some of our staff. May I also mention at this point, when you later on leave this webinar, we would be very grateful if you could fill in a very, very short survey at the end, because it will help us to improve this event for future years as well. So first of all, let me introduce our department. So Benedict, you've obviously just met, who's the course leader for French and shares the Model Foreign Languages Head of Department role with me. My name is Tanya Bloss and I'm the German teacher. And we've got Rosanna, who's our course leader for Spanish. And we are very lucky that we are each year have got 3 language assistants. So this year we've got Adrien Comtesse, we've got Pauline Bosat and Tendaya Almeida from France, Germany and Spain, who are helping us delivering the course, and they help us leading the conversation classes. So the aim for this evening today is that we want to give you a quick overview of the A-level languages courses. So we're going to talk about French, Spanish and German in general, because you will see that the exams, etc., are very similar. And we will give you a little bit of specific information when it's needed. We also talk about our entry requirements. There will be a bit of fun as well with a little quiz so that you can test your knowledge on the 3 different countries. We will talk about the progression, what's going to happen after Reigate College, what you can do with languages. And then there is the time for you to ask some questions. So there is the question and answer function on Teams, on Zoom. So if you would like to ask any questions, please go ahead with the function, and then we can hopefully pick up as many questions of those at the end. And then, as I've mentioned, there will be a survey once you leave the webinar. So why study foreign languages? So here's the quote of a languages undergraduate. So this person said, "I think languages just set you free. If you look at a map and you notice how small Britain is in relation to the rest of the world, you can go out there when perhaps the person next door to you is just going to be working here for the rest of their lives. It's just like liberation." And absolutely, foreign languages do help you open doors. And another quote, which sometimes is quite typical if we don't know a language very well: "If you're traveling around the world, speaking language is better than shouting." So instead of having to shout like 2 beers and repeating it, you will be actually able to talk to the people in their own language. So why are languages in demand, like language graduates once they've studied after A-level, but also obviously after a university degree? So by learning a language and by following the A-level course, you will learn a lot of independence. There is for example, in the second year, an independent research project where you have to independently research a topic, and you will speak about this topic in your speaking exam later on. And that really helps with your research skills, but also with completing tasks independently. A lot of problem solving will be part of it too, because obviously when you're faced with certain grammar aspects, you will have to think about translation. How do I translate this? How do I apply my grammar, etc.? And you need to actually be happy to take on challenges, because it's not going to be easy learning a language and developing the language. There will be obstacles in the way and you have to overcome them. But once you get there, it will be really rewarding. Obviously, the course, there's a lot of speaking practice in there as well, lots of teamwork, group work, etc. So that will help you later on with employability as well. Good time management. So there is quite a lot to go through in the course, but with good time management, you will be able to get there in the end. And that again will help you later on when you're in a job. Analytical thinkers. Again, lots of thinking going on when you do translations, when you write a text, when you speak, etc. And that will help you later on. Proven comprehension skills. Of course, a language is there to be understood, to understand, and to make yourself understood. We already talked about the proven research skills, and actually a language is proving a lot of creativity as well, because you are going from learning things off by heart to then later on actually creating spontaneous speech all of the time. So if you think about trips, obviously being in the country is going to really help you. So what we've had so far is a trip for the French and for the Spanish students. which is a combination of having languages classes in the morning and some activities in the afternoon. So for the French side, they're going to Montpellier. For Spanish, they're going to Salamanca. And then for the German side, for next year, we hope to have a trip to Berlin up and running, which is a joint trip with the history department, which will be more a study trip rather than the idea of having classes in the morning, just because of the reasons of having small classes. And it's far more difficult to then set up the same kind of study trip as we do for French and Spanish, but still very worthwhile. And if I go on the trip, you'll be speaking lots and lots of German. So, and you can see there are quite a lot of students who've taken part in these pictures. And Ben is going to briefly talk about the trip to Montpellier.
Right, good evening again, everyone. So before COVID, we went to Montpellier. Well, we traditionally always used to go to Montpellier whenever it's possible. And in fact, it has been possible up until COVID every year. It's a really lovely town. It's a university town in the south of France. And traditionally what happens is that we have lessons in the morning and activities in the afternoon. Very often it's in March and we have a lovely day, generally in the middle, where we go to the beach and have ice cream. It's a very similar story for Spain. As Tanya said, they go to Salamanca and same thing. So you're with host families. The families are vetted. And normally students are in pairs in the families, sometimes in groups of 3, but no boy-girl groups. And then there's the activities can vary, but there's always lessons in the morning with teachers who are generally very young, very enthusiastic, and then activities in the afternoon. Okay. And yeah, you've already spoken about the trip to Germany, haven't you, Tanya? So are we moving on to the next slide? Yep. Okay.
So the resources at Reigate College. So we've got language assistants, which is an absolute plus, and it is so fantastic to have language assistants teaching an extra hour on the timetable for the students. So they're usually in their normal classrooms in German, usually 7 or 8 students. In French, we might have 10 or 12 students in a class, but for Spanish, you often have classes, for example, of 20. So then with the language assistants, we are actually able to have much smaller groups, and each student will have an extra hour on the timetable to practice their conversation skills, which is absolutely fantastic because often it's actually the speaking skill students are a bit worried about. And obviously the speaking exam is at the end of the 2 years, so it is assessed with 30%. So it's really useful to have the language assistants who can also then obviously pass on cultural knowledge firsthand from the countries they're coming from. So there's a lot of cultural knowledge embedded in the course as well. There will also be obviously some games like grammar games, etc. And also lots of targeted exam practice so that our students feel absolutely ready when it comes to the second year. We use computers a lot for web-based activities, but also for all of our listening activities, because in the A-level course, it is very different to GCSE, so you're having control of your own listening material rather than having to sit in a hall and only hear the material twice. We also have eStream, where we've got quite a lot of films for the students uploaded so that they can watch the films that are part of our course, but also so that they can watch some series or some other films that are helping them to improve their language skills. So we offer A-levels in French, German, and Spanish, and they're all taken over 2 years. So in the first year, we're looking at aspects of the society and artistic culture, and we're analyzing a film. And in the second year, we've got, again, aspects of the society and artistic culture, but with different topics. So for example, racism comes in, or migration is a big topic, but also there's like the political life. And as well, we're going to look at the film in a little bit more depth because the AS questions and A2 questions differ slightly, and we're also working on some literature. So we are going to give you a quick overview of the different films and books we're studying. So in German, we are going to watch the film Das Leben der Anderen, and this film is about the GDR and how the Stasi, so the secret police, impacted quite heavily on the people living there, and how actually kind of art changed a Stasi officer and how he turned from this kind of like quite evil person to a very good person in the end and helping the people he surveyed. And then we're also studying Der Besuch der alten Dame, which is a play, even though the students first of all think, oh, literature, but in actual fact, this text is talking about greed, it's talking about money and how money can influence certain decisions. And they warm quite a lot to it later on and really enjoy analyzing it and writing their essays on it. So I'm going to hand over to Benne, who's going to talk about the French and Spanish side.
Okay, so the French film is Au revoir les enfants. In fact, both the film and the book are similar in the sense that they both deal with France under the occupation and have similar topics. In Au revoir les enfants, both are true stories actually. The film is a true story of a Catholic boarding school where the headmaster, who's a priest, is hiding Jewish children. And Un sac de billes, the novel, is also about, it's the true story of Joseph Joffo, who had to flee with his brother. He was only 11 and the brother was 13 at the beginning of the war when they had to flee and, go into the free zone, escape the milice, the French collaboration police, and obviously the Nazis or, les gendarmes, etc. And then for Spanish, the film is María Llena Eres de Gracia, and it's basically about a drug mule. So the main character she comes from a very underprivileged background, and she's becoming a drug mule to take drugs into the US, I think. La Casa de Bernardo Alba is a play, and it's about the pressure between society, pressure on women at the time of Lorca, etc. It's a very, very interesting play. The head of the household is Bernarda Alba, and her husband has died, so she imposes 8 years of mourning, I think, on the daughters, and it's all about the oppression. It feels really dark, really oppressive, but it's a fantastic play. Really good. So, in terms of entry requirements, we would expect students to come with a 6 or above at GCSE in the language that they'd like to study. Doesn't mean that if you don't get that grade, you can't do languages. It means that in the short time that we have, it's going to be too big a jump. And that's also why we would ask for 4 or above in English. So as Tanya mentioned, it is hard work. We don't lie about this. It doesn't come easy, but we have got lots of tricks to help you make it a bit easier, a bit more fun, maybe. In particular, all 3 of us, we use Quizlets quite a lot. We advise you to actually have a go yourself at something called lyrics training. It's really good fun. It's like basically listening to songs and typing in the lyrics. It's like, think of it as a sort of written karaoke, if you like. And yeah, the lessons, we do have lots of fun, but we do also have it's also a lot of hard work, and we will be on your back if you don't do your homework. But we also try to make it as fun and interactive. As Tanya mentioned, we've got young language assistants who are very youthful, energetic, and they know all the latest trends in terms of music, that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you. Right, so now Sarah has kindly done a little quiz for us. So there'll be 4 questions on Germany, then followed by 4 questions on France, followed by 4 questions on Spain, and you can vote about, it's just a bit of fun, really, a bit of general knowledge. Okay, so we'll start with Germany. And you will have 4 questions. You will have maybe to scroll down to choose the correct answer. So question 1, Germany has the 2nd largest population in Europe. To the nearest million, how many people live in Germany? So you could choose option like answer A, B, C, or D, and you can click. I'm not sure, I'll try, Tanya, to pronounce this right. What is the closest English translation for the German word Schadenfreude? I hope that's not too bad, apparently. So is it pleasure derived from the success of others, displeasure derived from the success of others, pleasure derived from the misfortune of others, or etc. Displeasure derived from the misfortune of others. Berlin became the capital of reunited Germany in 1990, but which city was the capital city of Germany before reunification? So you can choose one of the 4 options below. And in German culture, is it considered, it is considered to be rude to do what? To wave, to laugh in public, to be late, or to shake hands? Okay, so we'll leave you a bit of time to give your answers. Yeah, okay, right. So, so the correct answer for number 1 was. I'll wait a bit. I'll give you a bit more time to give your answers. Right, so the correct answer for question 1 was 83 millions. For question 2, Schadenfreude is pleasure derived from the misfortune of others. The capital of West Germany before reunification was Bonn, sorry. And in German culture, it is rude to be late. So now we'll move on to the questions about France. Good. So in French, what does une location mean? Is it rental, a location, or a car park? Question 2, what do French people call the English Channel? Do they call it le coude, la Manche, or le fleuve? Okay. Question 3, what is le pressing in France? Is it a juice bar, a dry cleaner, or a traditional board game? And who said, this one is quite famous in France, who said, how can you govern a country which has 246 varieties of cheese? Is it Bonaparte, De Gaulle, or Jacques Chirac? Okay. Okay, I'll leave you 10 more seconds to choose your answers. Okay. Ooh. Right, so the correct answers was une location means a rental. The verb to rent is louer. French people call the English Channel la Manche, which funnily enough also means the sleeve, as in, you know, coat sleeve. Le pressing is a dry cleaner. And it's De Gaulle, Charles de Gaulle, who said this. Good, so now we'll move on to 4 questions about Spain, which will appear on your screen in a minute. Okay, so, and I will put on my best Spanish accent for you. So what are the 3 biggest cities in Spain? Is it Madrid, Bilbao, Barcelona, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, or Madrid, Tarragona, Sevilla? La Sagrada Familia is a famous landmark in Spain, but what building. Is it a basilica? I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right. I'm hoping I am. A museum or a shopping mall? How many people speak Spanish as their mother language? So again, you've got 3 options to choose from. And then how many countries have Spanish as an official language? 24, 15 or 20. Okay, so we'll leave you a few minutes again to give your answers. Okay. 10 more seconds. Okay. And the correct answers were the 3 biggest cities in Spain are Madrid, Barcelona, and Valencia. La Sagrada Familia in Barcelona is a basilica. If 570 million people speak Spanish as their mother tongue, and 20 countries have Spanish as their official language. Okay, so we hope you enjoyed the quiz. Now we're moving on to more serious things again. Right, so A-level exam is made up of 3 papers. It sometimes comes as a shock that paper 1 is 2.5 hours long. Yeah, so it's, you need to be prepared for this, and it's 50% of the actual A-level grade. Paper 2, which is made up of a choice of 2 essays on the film and a choice of 2 essays on the book or on the play, is 20%. But I'd like to stress that even though it's 20%, it's actually often a paper that students find quite easy because there's only so many characters or so many themes that the questions could be about. So I wouldn't advise students to neglect that because they think it's only 20%. And paper 3 is made up of this stimulus card, and mostly in year 1, they practice loads of stimulus cards. And students will quickly find that these are quite formulaic and, you always follow the same pattern. And then that's followed by, as Tanya mentioned, the independent research project. And that's something that students need to choose a topic that's of interest to them. I think it's really important that they choose something that they feel passionate about, because that interest will shine through when they in the performance normally and in their speaking exam. But we will give them all the guidance that we are allowed to give them in terms of the IRP when they come onto the course. Okay. In terms of higher education, languages are a facilitating subject for Russell Group University. Typically, Russell Group universities look for an A grade at A level, but in our experience, they often accept lower grades. Other university will accept lower grades, especially if you opt for a combined degree. I think Tanya, I'm sure, will agree that languages are seen as a very solid option. It's very well respected as a subject. And many, of course, if you do actually many courses will offer a year abroad, either studying or working. And of course, it makes sense if you want to do a language at university that you want to spend 6 months, ideally more, in the country to practice in real life. So the British Council predicts that the top 5 languages needed for the UK to remain competitive globally after Brexit continue to be French, German, Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. In fact, the CBI survey indicates that the demand for these languages from businesses, that 54% of businesses value French, 51 German, 50% Spanish, etc. Okay, good. Thank you very much for coming and for attending online. Very sorry again about the change of plan, but the safety of our student was our main concern when making that decision. You can, on the college website, you can look out for new starters activities that will be released from the 1st of June in 3 different parts. And these need to be completed by Choices Day. We also recommend that you follow the college on Instagram, on Facebook, at Reigate College. And we look forward to welcoming you on Introductory Day. So it's going to be a half session, either on the 27th or on the 29th of June. And Choices Day also, we'll also see on Choices Day on the 29th of August. Okay. So I think now there's time for questions, for if anybody has questions for Tanya or myself.
So we've had one question coming in already about the speaking exam. And the question is concerned about like memorized language or coming up with language on the spot. So the stimulus card Bennett talked about, you only have actually got 5 minutes preparation time in the exam. So you will have to talk spontaneously, but as Ben already mentioned, they're quite formulaic. So you've got the first question is always about like, what is this card about? And the second question is an opinion about the topic on the card. And then for the question 3, I wouldn't say that it's kind of like memorized language, but we've talked about cultural knowledge, and question 3 is actually where you're going to show off your cultural knowledge so that you can demonstrate that you've actually studied the country's specific information quite well. So for example, it could be that in Unit 4, you talk about traditions and festivities, and the question then might say, what other traditions do you know of like German-speaking countries? And this is where you then show off about aspects of, for example, Christmas and how Christmas is celebrated. And you discuss the question if it's actually still kind of tradition or if it's actually coming in more in a commercialized way.
Right, so we've received another question, which is how many hours in class compared to how many hours of study outside of class? So typically you would have 2 doubles, so that's 4 hours with your subject, your language teacher. You would also have 1 hour with the foreign language assistant, so that's 5 hours of contact time. And on top of this, you would have 2 hours of homework per week, plus 2 hours of structured learning. Well, actually, sorry, I'm telling a lie, 4 hours. So you would have 2 homework. Technically, each homework should be 2 hours. We tend to be kinder because we think that in languages, it's more about, as Tanya said, little and often. But between 4 and 6 hours of homework and 2 hours of structured learning. So 8 hours, I would say, of personal study. Okay.
So we also had a question about if students will become fluent in the language by the end of their course. I mean, if you compare yourself when you finish your GCSE, where you probably have learned quite a lot of language off by heart for your speaking exam, etc., you will definitely be able to spontaneously talk about topics, and you reach quite a bit of fluency by the 2nd year, absolutely. And there also has been a question about how large I expect the German class to be in September. So fingers crossed, we're going to have at least 6 students, because that's kind of like our minimum number of students we need to have. Up to this point, I was always incredibly lucky that I had at least the 6. So if I compare to this year, I've got in the lower 6, I've got 7 students, and in my upper 6, I've got 8 students. But yeah, around those numbers usually is the class size for German.
Another question was roughly how long are the essays we write about the book? The essays about the book or the film, personally, if you look at the exam board, they maintain that you can write an essay in, I think it's like 300 words. I don't think so. I think it takes longer to write enough content. So I would say personally, I would say, I don't know if Tanya would agree, between 400 and 600 words. It's about right, I would say.
So we had a question coming in, what is structured learning? So what's going to happen in the structured learning is that we are going to set you some work which is worth 2 hours. and you're going to work on this independently. So for languages, we often start off with like vocabulary learning, maybe spending half an hour on a particular set of vocabulary. We often incorporate a bit of grammar practice on a topic we've just covered in class so that you can practice that topic a bit more. There's always an exam focus, so that could be an exam question, it could be a translation, it could be a summary task. And also we incorporate the speaking cards that you're going to prepare for the language assistant in our structured learning, so which adds up to like half an hour of each element, which then adds up to 2 hours. And you usually get the work sent on a Monday morning, and you've got until Sunday evening, so a whole week to complete the work, so that on a Monday morning or when your first lesson is of that particular subject, that we can then check that you've completed all of that work. So another question came, if essays are under exam conditions. Yes, absolutely. So the paper 2 with the 2 essay exams, that's going to happen in the hall, and they will be completed under exam conditions. You will not have access to a dictionary. You will have to have your knowledge in your head, and also kind of like the language you want to incorporate.
If I can add something about what Tanya said about the essays, they are an exam condition, but I'm aware that it sounds really daunting for students. However, as I said before, there's only so many characters, so many themes it could be about, and we do prepare you a lot. So it sounds scary now as GCSE students, but it's actually not that bad. So that's what I wanted to say. Are the Spanish teachers native? Rosanna is a native speaker. She comes from, oh my goodness, I've forgotten. She comes from South America, a country in South America, and I can't believe I've forgotten.
Paraguay, isn't it?
It's Paraguay, yeah, you're right, Tanya. She comes from Paraguay. And the other question was, how long is the exchange trip to Spain? It is 5 days, traditionally. So it is Sunday to Friday, I'm pretty sure.
So the question came in, how many students will study French and Spanish? So if I compare to this year, so the Spanish classes, we've got just under 20 students per, so we've got 2 classes of Spanish in the lower 6, so just under, so maybe 18, 16 students. The upper 6 classes are a little bit bigger, so they're kind of like 19 and 20. So Spanish is very popular, and classes are kind of like, yeah, up to 20 students usually. And for French, in the lower 6, we've got around about like 10, 12 students. Upper 6, slightly lower, kind of like around the 10 student mark. So again, in French, we've got 2 classes of each in the lower 6 and in the upper 6. And for German, we've already talked about that my numbers are smaller, and I've got 1 lower 6 class and 1 upper 6 class. And yeah, the typical maximum class size for us in languages is kind of 20. So there was one question about how you would compare the A-level to the GCSE for each of the courses. So I'll start off, and Ben can then add anything what she thinks. So first of all, obviously, at GCSE level, you talk a lot about yourself. You know, it's about like what hobbies you have, describing your family, etc. And so it's kind of like the kind of smaller level. But at A level, we're actually looking more at a society level. So you will encounter some similar topics. So for example, we look at family again, but it's not necessarily about you describing your own family, but it's about looking how the concept of family has actually changed over time. Or if you think of digital media, etc. So it's not about like what you use, but what impact has it got. Also, obviously, the big difference is that you study a film and that you study some literature, and that in your speaking exam, that you prepared a research project and you present your research project and discuss it in the speaking exam. So I think that would be definitely big difference, but also the volume you're expected to learn. So if you think about vocabulary, there's a lot of vocabulary you have to go through, and that will obviously be much more than what you've done at GCSE level. Grammar-wise, we are revising quite a lot of the grammar at the beginning of the lower 6 from what you know. So that would be your different tenses. In German would be, for example, the cases. And French, I'm sure there's a lot of like adjective agreement. You will have revised, same for Spanish as well. And then we like build on top of it so that you learn some new grammar concepts like the passive, for example. For me as well, it's like the subjunctive, the same obviously for French and Spanish, that you go into far more depth for those topics. So grammar and vocabulary will be definitely bigger in volume as well.
Okay, so to another of the differences, Tanya's summed it up beautifully, but I would say what we advise our students to do just to make their lives easier is to start surrounding themselves with the language from, you know, if you could start now, it would be really good. By that, I mean, watch everything you watch on telly. If you're interested in French, watch it all in French. It's very easy to do. Or if it's Spanish, you know, Spanish, etc. I've got another question, which is, what will tasks set before the course be like? So I assume that's talking about the start with confidence. No, sorry. Yes, start with confidence activities, which you'll find online. They're very simple. They're very accessible. My best advice is just do your best. It's not really a way to test you. It's just to give you a bit of a flavor of what it's like. So another question was, what variant of Spanish is taught? I'm aware there's often a vocab and pronunciation different. That's true. It tends to be very standard Spanish from Spain. So even when we have students, so if we've got, for example, every now and then we've had FLAs coming from South America, and they would use different pronouns. So I'm not sure. I think they say vos possibly in some cases, or they use ustedes more. But those differences will be pointed out to you. And in fact, it's actually good to be aware of all of this. So we will teach you a bit about all the different types of Spanish. Normally in the listening, for example, I've taken the Spanish paper myself, and it tends to be very much Spanish from Spain.
So we then had a question about how much of the lesson is taught in the language. So we are all kind of like, as we've just heard from Benny as well, convinced that being immersed in the language is actually the best way. So we're not going to throw you into the deep end straight away from the beginning. So there will be some English as well as we go along, but usually by Christmas, we try to teach in the foreign language most of the time. So there will be occasions when we then do have a bit of English. Obviously there will be translations, etc. But yeah, usually by Christmas we try to be speaking our language the whole time. There's also a question about when in year 13 do we finish the content and start revising? So as Ben already pointed out, languages is little but often. So that is the key bit, because it's a skills-based subject. You need to be working on it all of the time. So revision is going to go on throughout the 2 years. So whenever we do a unit, there will be like exam questions that fit that particular unit as well. But the content we usually finish around kind of like by Easter time, and then do lots of revision and blitz lots of revision after Easter. But as I said, the structured learning gives a great opportunity of already revising topics that you've covered. So another question,
Apologies, I was on mute the whole time. Sorry about this. So another question was, do we need to buy materials such as textbooks beforehand? Is there any other equipment that we will need? The answer is no. You're welcome to bring your own headphones if you prefer. We do have headphones in the classroom. Textbooks, the literature book, all of that is provided. In terms of equipment, it's just literally your folders and your pens and that sort of thing. Everything else, some students choose to bring their own laptop, you don't, or tablet, so you don't have to. Okay.
So we had another question about watching films in French, Spanish, and German. So is it better to watch the films in the target language dubbed or subtitles? With subtitles, so you will see actually on the eStream when you come study German, I've actually got quite a lot of films like with both of the subtitles in English or also then in German, because it has got advantages and disadvantages. So as long as you like hear the foreign language, but then you could just go for like understanding, you have the English subtitles, or you could actually then have it in German as well and read along in the same, obviously for French and Spanish, but read along at the same time, because the subtitles always have to be a bit shorter to what they say, because there's not the same space. So the language is going to be easier and simpler. So you hear the more complex and you read the easier version of it. But if it's just about understanding, the English will be really good as well.
So I think that's it. I think we're out of questions. So thank you very much again for attending, and we very much look forward to seeing you soon on Introductory Days. Good. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.